today's lesson, we're going to be talking about what I think is the easiest way to improve your guitar speed. And not only is it the easiest, but it's the most fun way. So without further ado, make sure you hit the like button, really helps out, and let's get started. Okay, so we're going to be looking at some different finger combinations that are super duper important, and they're the most simple finger combinations, but yet they're actually the most effective to practice. So step one, actually, before we even take a look at any of the finger combinations, is if you want your speed to get to the highest level possible, you need to be able to do the simplest things on the guitar at the highest level that you can. So what is the simplest thing that we can possibly do on the guitar and do really fast? Well, it's actually, number one is just picking one note. So for all these examples, we're going to be using this drum track, and you can use any drum track you want, or you should use a metronome and practice everything in time, because that is going to be actually the number one thing that's going to make sure that you improve your speed, is make sure you're playing in time, and then you're slowly bumping up the speed also of the tempo that you're playing over, whether it's the drum track or the metronome. So let's listen to this, and I'm just gonna pick one of these notes. So if you already know all the natural notes on the guitar, fantastic. If you don't, we got some of them there on the second string. So I'm gonna play this E note here, which is on the 5th fret of the second string. So first of all, you should be able to alternate pick this with an 8th note rhythm. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So if you can't do that, well, you gotta practice that until you can. Because if you can't do that, you have no chance of being able to do that with multiple notes, right? If we can't play one note, what makes you think you're gonna be able to play multiple notes? So then, once you can do that, try to do it with 16th notes. So 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and again, alternate picking, down, up, down, up. And this should feel really relaxed. So you might run into the problem, you might get messed up after a while. So if it's hard to keep that going for a long time, try doing a short burst and taking a break like this. And then slowly extending the amount of time that you're playing. So now I'm just gonna do 8 notes in a row. So. And etc., etc. Make sure that you keep that going until you can play at the tempo that you picked, a non-stop chain of 16th notes, okay? So now we will pause the drum track. Now let's get into actually some of the different finger combinations. So again, step one, you gotta make sure that you can just play one note, and you can play that competently with alternate picking. You just can't play multiple notes if you can't play one note. So step two is that we're going to figure out some speed combinations of 2 to 3 fingers on one string. So why one string? First of all, I talk a lot about playing on one string in this channel for a lot of different reasons. Number one, I think it's easy to think on one string because you can lay out all the notes in a very linear fashion. It's also helpful for your fretboard knowledge, but actually none of those are the reasons why we're going to use one string today to improve our speed. The reason why is because, again, we need to make things as simple as possible. A lot of the different runs and things that we play and scale patterns that we want to be able to play fast, they cross over multiple strings. And that in and of itself presents some problems, right? You probably have seen different videos of how to string skip or just cross over different strings. We want to actually completely get rid of that for right now. Why? Because think about it. Just like I said, if you can't play one note, how are you going to be able to play multiple notes? Well, if you can't play fast on one string, how are you going to be able to play fast over multiple strings? You're not. You have to be able to play fast on one string. Then you get good at transitioning between strings, and then that's how you can play fast overall the guitar and be able to navigate through all the strings that you want to. So actually found within the major scale is going to be all of the finger combinations that you need. So a lot of people do this like spider exercise thing, etc., etc., etc. I don't really like that much. Why? Because you can't really use it in actual music. But this, if we actually practice with the major scale, you could do this in a different key if you wanted to. You're gonna actually get the practical finger combinations that you're gonna actually use when you're playing a solo. So let's start off with actually, first of all, just 2 notes. So if you notice, when there's 2 notes that are right next to each other, there's basically only going to be a couple of possibilities. So let's look over here at this D, this E, and this F. Okay, so D and E, they are 2 frets or 1 fret apart from each other. So, well, 2 frets. There's 1 fret in between. So there's 2 main ways that we want to be able to play this. So we can either play it with our first and our third finger, or we can play with our second and our fourth finger. And it depends on what situation we're in as to which of those finger combinations we're going to use, but we're going to end up using both of them. At some point in some solo you learn or when you're improvising, you're going to need to be able to use both of those. So I'll throw on a drum track and use both of those finger combinations to practice that whole step interval. Again, try to do it with 16th notes, but if you can't yet, try to do it with 8th notes. So that's 8th notes, and this is 16th. So I'm using the first and third. Again, if you can't go back and forth between 2 notes, how are you going to be able to play more notes? Now I use my second and my fourth finger. So that's typically what you're going to find when there's 1 fret in between 2 notes, is that you skip a finger as well. So just a couple of things I want you to keep in mind from now to the rest of this video is that number 1, you got to try to keep your fingers super duper close to the fingerboard, okay? Don't be letting your fingers fly away like this. You got to really pay attention and make sure that your fingers are staying super close to the fingerboard. And then also with the right hand, this is a really, really big tip, and I've talked about this before, but I haven't talked about it enough. You have to make sure that the absolute very tippy tip, just the absolute end of the pick, is the only thing that's contacting the string. Okay, if you use any more than that, you stick the pick closer into your guitar and it goes past the strings, well, guess what? Your pick's gonna get... it's going to get stuck on the strings. But if you just use the absolute very tip, it's not going to be able to get stuck. It'll just go right over the strings, okay? So make sure that that picking motion is really small. Look at how small this picking motion is. Right, I'm not going like this. I'm not doing a strum. I'm not letting my pick go all the way to past another string. Think about it, you only need to literally move your pick from one side of the string to the other side of the string. Anything other than that is wasted energy. Okay, so there's those 2 finger combinations, and then let's do one more, which is actually, if we check out now this E and this F. So of course, this is going to be something super common that we're going to find, is we're going to find just 2 notes that are literally right next to each other. So there's going to be 3 different possible combinations we can do with this. We can use our first and our second finger. We use our second and our third finger. And then we can use our third and our fourth finger. So there's 3 different ways that we can do that, okay? So let's try each of those really quick. So this is our first and second finger. Second and third, and third and fourth. And obviously, for the sake of time, I'm going through them really quickly, but if you're struggling with any of them, you got to sit there for a while until it feels really comfortable. By the way, also, before we continue, the entire time I've been using alternate picking, and that's fantastic. However, alternate picking, unless you're one of these crazy, super, elitist alternate picking people, after you get a certain point, it's easier if you start to implement hammer-ons and pull-offs. So that's my next big tip is when you're doing any of these finger combinations, whether it's these combinations of 2 or we're gonna end up doing combinations of 3, practice them both with alternate picking and then also with hammer-ons and pull-offs. So it depends on which one you started on as to if you're gonna use a hammer-on or pull-off. So if I start on the lower note, then I need to hammer on to the higher note. So if I start on E, I gotta hammer on to F. So, and there's different combinations you can do of that too. So you can have this like, I'm gonna hammer on and pull off 4 notes like this. And then, or I could just hammer on every other note like this. And then if I start on the higher note, then I would be pulling off from the first note like this. Or I could extend how much I'm playing that legato, the hammer-ons and the pull-offs. So as soon as you start having to go back without picking, then you have to implement a hammer-on again. So all of these, I encourage you gotta do alternate picking, and you have to use this sort of legato style of using hammer-ons and pull-offs. But alternate picking is really, really important, and the hammer-ons and pull-offs are really important as we get faster and we start to try faster rhythms. Okay, so one other finger combination is actually, if you take like the scale and you skip one of the notes. So for example, now D, and then we're actually gonna take F. So this is gonna be skipping over that E note. So to do this, we can have a finger combination of 1 and then our 4th finger. So this is really important to practice this one too. So alternate picking and legato. So let's see what that sounds like. So this is legato using a hammer-on. Now I'll do it the opposite way. I'll start in F. And now alternate picking. Okay, so make sure you do that. And then also there's one more I do want to show you, which is actually if you take this C and this E note. So this one is going to be the toughest one. And you might want to instead take like F and A. Let's do that actually. Let's do F and A because it'll be a little bit easier. It's higher up on the fretboard. So F on the 6th fret, A on the 10th fret. So this one is a big stretch, right? We're stretching literally 5 frets, but sometimes you might end up needing to use that finger combination. So let's practice one. Or the opposite. Legato. And legato the other way with hammer-ons. So you see, there's a sense of thoroughness that you have to have too when you are working on this stuff. You have to make sure you're like trying to flesh out like every single combination. Am I doing legato hammer-ons, pull-offs? But you see, there's actually a lot of variations that you can make, even just taking like 2 notes and playing them back and forth. It's like kind of insane. This is the end of part 1 of the video. If you're watching on the first day, you're gonna have to wait until tomorrow for part 2 to come out. But if you're watching afterwards, then check right here and you're gonna see the link for part 2. So make sure you check that out so you can get the whole entire process for improving your guitar speed. And make sure you check out the Jamsville GPS Fretboard Fundamentals course at jamsville.com.